The police found 17 bodies in his basement. 17. But here's what will make your blood run cold. His neighbors still describe him as the nicest man on the street. For 8 years, Margaret Chen waved to him every morning. For 8 years, Tom Rodriguez borrowed his lawnmower. For 8 years, the Patel family trusted him to water their plants when they went on vacation. They had no idea they were living next door to one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. This is the story of how an entire neighborhood became unwitting accomplices to murder, and how close you might be living to someone just like him. Tonight's story is titled, "They Thought He Was Just a Quiet Neighbor. They Were Wrong." But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, if you're wearing headphones, perfect. If not, you might want to put some on. Or you can lower the volume now, just enough so my voice blends gently with the stillness of your room. Close your eyes. Let your shoulders sink just a bit more into your pillow. You don't have to do anything. Just listen. Picture this. It's Tuesday morning, 7:23 a.m. You're rushing to get your kids ready for school when you notice your neighbor across the street dragging something heavy from his garage to his car. Something wrapped in a blue tarp. You pause for a second. Maybe you even wave. He waves back with that same friendly smile he's had for years. You think nothing of it. Maybe he's doing some home improvement project. Maybe he's taking old furniture to donate. What you don't realize is that you just witnessed body number 12 being transported to its final resting place. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Willowbrook Avenue. Population 847. A quiet suburban street where the biggest drama used to be Mrs. Patterson's roses growing over the property line. Where children still played in the street until the streetlights came on. Where everyone knew everyone, or thought they did. Our story begins in 2015, when David Allen Richter moved into 1247 Willowbrook Avenue. Single guy, mid-40s, worked from home doing something with computers. Kept to himself but was always polite. Always helpful. Always normal. But here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a mirror. Because everything I'm about to tell you about David Richter and his neighbors, it could be happening on your street. Right now. So as you listen to this, I want you to think about your own neighbors. That quiet guy who lives alone. The woman who works odd hours. The family that keeps their curtains closed. How well do you really know them? Because the residents of Willowbrook Avenue thought they knew David Richter. They were catastrophically wrong. The perfect neighbor. Margaret Chen was 67 years old when David moved in across the street. Retired librarian, lived alone since her husband passed, had that typical neighbor knows everything about everyone vibe. She was the unofficial welcome committee for Willowbrook Avenue. I brought him a casserole, Margaret would later tell police. Homemade beef stew. He was so grateful. So polite. Asked about my garden. Remembered my cat's name. What kind of monster remembers your cat's name? But here's where it gets interesting. Margaret wasn't just being neighborly. She was being observant. And her observations painted a picture of the perfect neighbor. David Richter never played music too loud. Never had loud parties. Actually, never had parties at all. Kept his lawn immaculate. Shoveled not just his own driveway in winter, but helped elderly neighbors with theirs. When Margaret's porch light burned out, he replaced it without being asked. Tom Rodriguez lived next door with his wife and 2 kids. Tom was one of those guys who collected tools but never really knew how to use them. Guess who became his go-to guy for home repairs? David fixed our garbage disposal, helped me install a ceiling fan, even rebuilt our deck stairs when they started rotting. My wife used to joke that we should adopt him. He was like the older brother I never had. The Patel family, Raj, Priya, and their teenage daughter Ania, lived 2 houses down. When they went to visit family in India for 3 weeks, guess who offered to house sit? Free of charge. David watered their plants, brought in their mail, even mowed their lawn. When they came back, their house was cleaner than when they left. Are you starting to see the pattern here? David Richter wasn't just being nice. He was being strategic. Every act of kindness, every helpful gesture, every moment of fake sincerity was building something. Can you guess what? trust. But here's what none of them noticed. Here's what you need to pay attention to. David Richter was also collecting information about their schedules, about their habits, about when they were home and when they weren't. Margaret worked in her garden every day from 8 to 10 a.m. Tom left for work at 6:45 a.m. sharp, came home at 5:30 p.m. His wife Sarah taught preschool, left at 7:15 a.m., home by 4 p.m. The Patels had date night every Friday. Raj coached his daughter's soccer team Tuesday and Thursday evenings. David knew all of this because David was watching, always watching. Behind his friendly smile and helpful demeanor, he was cataloging every detail of their lives. And late at night, when the street was dark and quiet, David was in his home office, not working on computer programs like his neighbors thought. He was working on something else entirely. He was selecting his victims. The first disappearance. October 15th, 2016. A year and a half after David moved to Willowbrook Avenue. Jennifer Morse, 28 years old, marketing coordinator at a downtown advertising firm, lived alone in a studio apartment 12 miles away from David's house. Jennifer had been out with friends at a wine bar called the Rusty Anchor. Security footage shows her leaving at 11:47 p.m. She texted her roommate that she was taking an Uber home. The Uber arrived at her apartment at 12:23 a.m. Jennifer never made it inside. Her roommate called police the next day when Jennifer didn't come home. Standard missing person case. Jennifer had no enemies, no ex-boyfriends with grudges, no financial problems. She simply vanished. Police interviewed the Uber driver. Solid alibi. Checked security cameras in the area. Nothing useful. Searched her apartment, her workplace, her hangout spots. No leads. Jennifer Morse became just another statistic. Another young woman who disappeared into the night. But here's what the police didn't know. Here's what no one knew. While Jennifer's friends and family were posting missing person flyers and organizing search parties, her body was already decomposing in a makeshift grave behind David Richter's tool shed. And life on Willowbrook Avenue continued exactly as normal. Margaret Chen still waved to David every morning. Tom Rodriguez still borrowed his tools. The Patels still asked him to house sit. Because why wouldn't they? David was the same helpful, friendly neighbor he'd always been. In fact, around this time, David started being even more helpful. Margaret's garbage can kept getting blown over by the wind. One day she came home to find David had bought her a new one, heavier, with a secure lid. Tom's wife Sarah mentioned she felt unsafe walking to her car in the evening. David installed a motion sensor light in their driveway. These weren't random acts of kindness. This was a predator perfecting his camouflage. Because David had discovered something that night he killed Jennifer Morse. Something that would drive him to kill again and again and again. He liked it. The hunting ground. For the next 6 years, David Richter averaged 3 kills per year. 18 total victims. All women. All living alone. All selected through what he called his research process. David had turned murder into a science. He used social media, dating apps, professional networking sites. He'd create fake profiles, strike up conversations, learn about his victims' routines, their vulnerabilities, their habits. He knew Lisa Park jogged alone in Riverside Park every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. He knew Amanda Foster always stopped at the same 24-hour gas station after her night shift at the hospital. He knew Rebecca Chen, yes, Margaret's niece who was visiting from Portland, had a habit of walking alone to get late-night coffee. But here's the truly chilling part. David didn't just hunt random strangers. He hunted women connected to his own neighborhood. Because he realized something that most serial killers never figure out. The best hiding place for a monster is in plain sight. When Rebecca Chen disappeared during her visit to her Aunt Margaret, David was right there offering comfort and support. He helped organize search parties. He printed flyers. He even donated money to the reward fund. Margaret would later tell police, "David held me while I cried. He promised me we'd find Rebecca. He looked me in the eye and promised me." Rebecca's body was buried in David's backyard, 15 feet from where he and Margaret were standing. And this is where our story takes a turn that will make you question everything you think you know about evil. Because David Richter wasn't some reclusive loner who avoided human contact. He wasn't the creepy guy everyone suspected. He was the neighbor everyone trusted, the guy everyone liked, The person everyone turned to when they needed help. When the Johnsons' teenage daughter didn't come home one night, who did they call first? David. When Mrs. Patterson's car wouldn't start, who did she call? David. When the neighborhood watch needed someone to coordinate with police, who volunteered? David. David Richter had made himself indispensable to Willowbrook Avenue. And his neighbors had no idea they were asking a serial killer for help finding serial killer victims. The close calls. March 3rd, 2022. This is where David's perfect system almost cracked. Almost. Margaret Chen was having trouble sleeping. Had been for weeks. Doctors said it was anxiety about her niece Rebecca, who'd been missing for 4 months. So Margaret started taking late-night walks around the block, just to clear her head. 2:17 a.m. Margaret was walking past David's house when she heard something that made her blood freeze. Thumping, coming from David's garage, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. Margaret stopped walking. The sound stopped too. Complete silence. Then it started again. Thump, drag, thump, drag. Now, what would you do in this situation? It's 2 a.m. Your neighbor's making strange noises in his garage. Do you investigate? Do you call police? Do you mind your own business? Margaret chose option number 4. She convinced herself she was imagining things. Margaret, you're being paranoid. David's probably just reorganizing his workshop. Or maybe he couldn't sleep either and decided to do some late-night project. Don't be that crazy neighbor who calls police over nothing. Margaret walked home, took a sleeping pill, went to bed. The next morning, David waved to her from his driveway like always. Big smile, friendly as ever. Even commented on how nice the weather was getting. Margaret waved back. Never mentioned the late-night sounds. Never asked what he'd been doing in his garage. Inside that garage, wrapped in plastic and waiting to be disposed of, was the body of victim number 14. Katie Summers, 31 years old, single mother of 2. David had killed her 6 hours earlier. But Margaret's close call wasn't the only one. Throughout 2022, David's neighbors started noticing small things. Tiny details that, individually, meant nothing. But together, Tom Rodriguez noticed David's garbage bags were always unusually heavy. And David always took them out himself, never letting the garbage collectors handle them. Sarah Rodriguez noticed David had started parking his car in the garage instead of the driveway. Said he was worried about break-ins, but Willowbrook Avenue had never had any crime. The Patel family noticed David had installed security cameras all around his house. High-end ones. Said he'd gotten a good deal online, but Raj worked in IT and recognized the equipment. Those cameras cost thousands of dollars. And then there was the smell. Mrs. Patterson, who lived behind David, started complaining about a strange odor coming from his backyard. Chemical-like, she said. David told her he was using fertilizer for a new garden project. Neighbors don't typically question neighbors. We're conditioned to be polite, to mind our own business, to give people the benefit of the doubt. And David was counting on exactly that social conditioning to keep his secret safe. But secrets have weight. And after 6 years and 17 bodies, David's secret was getting heavy. The mistake. Every serial killer makes a mistake. Has two. The compulsion that drives them to kill also drives them to take bigger risks, to get sloppy, to believe they're smarter than everyone else. David's mistake was victim number 18. November 14th, 2023. David had been trolling dating apps for weeks, looking for his next target. That's when he found her profile. Sarah Martinez, 26 years old, worked as a graphic designer, recently moved to town, didn't know anyone yet. Perfect victim, right? Wrong. What David didn't know was that Sarah Martinez was currently sleeping with Detective Mike Kowalski from the Metro Police Department. And Mike Kowalski was not the kind of guy who gave up easily. When Sarah disappeared after her date with Dan Richardson, David's fake identity, Mike immediately suspected foul play. Started investigating. Tracked down the fake profile. Found inconsistencies in David's story. And here's where David made his fatal error. Instead of laying low, instead of changing his pattern, instead of maybe even moving away, David panicked. He decided to accelerate his timeline. November 18th, 11:43 p.m. 4 days after Sarah Martinez disappeared. David loaded his car with 3 large duffel bags and drove to Riverside Park. The same park where he dumped 6 previous victims. What David didn't know was that Detective Kowalski had already connected Sarah's disappearance to 3 other missing persons cases. What he didn't know was that police had been conducting surveillance on potential dump sites. What David didn't know was that 2 patrol officers were watching him from behind a grove of trees as he dragged those duffel bags into the woods. This is Unit 47. We have a possible body dump in progress at Riverside Park, requesting backup immediately. David heard the sirens, dropped the bags, ran, but it was too late. Police had his license plate. They had his face on their patrol car cameras. They had the bags containing the remains of Sarah Martinez and 2 other victims. And in 6 hours, they would have a search warrant for 1247 Willowbrook Avenue. The raid, November 19th, 2023, 5:47 a.m. Margaret Chen was making her morning coffee when she saw the police cars. 7 of them, plus 2 unmarked vans and what looked like a crime scene unit, all parked in front of David's house. I thought maybe there'd been a break-in, or maybe David had seen something suspicious and called it in. He was always so vigilant about neighborhood safety. Margaret put on her robe and stepped onto her front porch. That's when she saw the officers in tactical gear. That's when she saw them surround David's house with weapons drawn. David Richter, this is Metro Police. We have a warrant to search your premises. Exit the house with your hands visible. Margaret's coffee mug slipped from her hands, shattered on the porch. By now, the entire neighborhood was awake. Tom and Sarah Rodriguez stood in their driveway in their pajamas. The Patel family watched from their upstairs window. Mrs. Patterson had called 3 other neighbors. Everyone wanted to know what was happening to David. Sweet, helpful David who'd never had to fly. David emerged from his house at 5:52 a.m. Hands raised, calm expression, even smiled slightly at the officers as they handcuffed him. Margaret would later tell reporters, "He looked right at me while they were arresting him. Looked right at me and nodded like he was saying goodbye. I waved back without thinking. Can you believe that? I waved at a serial killer." But the arrest was just the beginning. The real horror started when police began searching David's house. The first thing they found was David's home office. 3 computers, all encrypted. Hundreds of printed photos of women. Maps of the city with locations marked in red. And a notebook containing detailed profiles of 43 potential victims. 17 of those women were already dead. The second thing they found was David's basement. I'm not going to describe everything police discovered down there. This is YouTube, not a horror movie. But I will tell you this. They found enough evidence to confirm that David Richter had killed at least 17 women over 6 years. And they found something else. Something that made every detective on the scene want to vomit. David had been keeping trophies. The neighbor's reaction. Have you ever had your entire reality shattered in an instant? That's what happened to Willowbrook Avenue on November 19th, 2023. Within hours, the street was swarming with news crews, reporters, FBI agents, and morbidly curious strangers. The quiet suburban paradise had become ground zero for one of the worst serial killer cases in state history. But the media circus was nothing compared to what David's neighbors were going through internally. Margaret Chen didn't speak to anyone for 3 days, just sat in her living room, staring at David's house, trying to reconcile the friendly neighbor who'd fixed her porch light with the monster who'd murdered her niece. I keep thinking about all the times I invited him over for dinner. All the times I was alone in my house and he was right there. All the times I trusted him. How do you ever trust anyone again after something like this? Tom Rodriguez had a complete breakdown. Had to take leave from work. Started drinking heavily. His wife Sarah found him in their backyard at 3 a.m., tearing apart the deck that David had helped him build. He was in my house, playing with my kids. My daughter used to hug him when he came over. She called him Uncle David. How do I explain to a 7-year-old that Uncle David is a monster? The Patel family put their house up for sale immediately. Couldn't handle living on the same street where their trusted neighbor had been murdering women and burying them in his backyard. Raj's voice? We let him house sit for us. Gave him our keys. He was alone in our home for 3 weeks. My daughter's room, my wife's jewelry, our family photos. He was in there with all of it. We'll never feel safe anywhere again. But perhaps the most disturbing reaction came from Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson, who lived directly behind David, who'd been complaining about the smell from his backyard for months, who'd watched him working in his garden dozens of times. I knew, deep down, I knew something was wrong. The smell wasn't fertilizer. The way he always worked alone, never let anyone help him with his yard work. The way he'd stare at my windows sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. I knew, and I did nothing. Those women died because I did nothing. Mrs. Patterson was wrong, of course. She couldn't have known. None of them could have known. But guilt doesn't care about logic. The trial and confession. David Richter's trial began 8 months later. July 15, 2024. Media from across the country descended on our city. The prosecution had mountains of evidence, DNA, fingerprints, victim belongings found in David's house, detailed journals describing each murder. But David's defense team tried something unprecedented. They argued that David Richter was two different people. The helpful neighbor was real, they claimed, and the serial killer was real. But they were separate personalities in the same body. Multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, whatever you want to call it. David's lawyers claimed he literally didn't know what his other self was doing. It might have worked. Might have gotten him life in prison instead of death penalty. Might have let him live. But then David made a decision that shocked everyone in that courtroom. He fired his lawyers, decided to represent himself, and on the morning of August 3, 2024, David Richter stood up in front of a packed courtroom and confessed to everything. Not just the 17 murders police had evidence for. David confessed to 23 total killings spanning 9 years, starting 3 years before he even moved to Willowbrook Avenue. But his confession wasn't what you'd expect from a remorseful killer. David wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't claiming insanity. He was proud. I want everyone to understand something. I'm not crazy. I'm not mentally ill. I'm not some broken person who couldn't control himself. I killed those women because I wanted to, because I enjoyed it, because I was good at it. And I want my neighbors to know, you made it so easy. Margaret, Tom, the Patels, all of you, you welcomed me into your lives. You trusted me with your spare keys, your family stories, your daily routines. You gave me everything I needed to become the perfect killer. I'm not the monster hiding in the shadows that you need to be afraid of. I'm the monster hiding in plain sight. I'm the neighbor who brings you soup when you're sick. I'm the co-worker who remembers your birthday. I'm the friendly stranger who helps you carry your groceries. I'm everywhere. We're everywhere. And you'll never see us coming because you don't want to see us coming. Because believing in monsters is too scary. So you choose to believe in the illusion of safety instead. David Richter was sentenced to death. He's currently on death row, still writing letters to his former neighbors. Letters that go unopened and unread. The aftermath. It's been almost 2 years since David Richter's arrest. Willowbrook Avenue looks different now. Half the houses have for sale signs. The other half have security systems that didn't exist before. Margaret Chen still lives across the street from David's house. Now owned by the bank, boarded up, slowly rotting. She sits on her porch every morning with her coffee, staring at that house, trying to understand how evil can live so close to good. People ask me why I don't move. Where would I go? The monster isn't the house. The monster is the fact that I can't trust my own judgment anymore. I can't trust anyone anymore. Moving to a new street won't fix that. Tom and Sarah Rodriguez did move. Divorced 6 months later. Tom couldn't handle the guilt of having David around his children. Sarah couldn't handle Tom's paranoia about every new person they met. The Patel family relocated to Oregon. Raj told me in our interview that they still don't talk to their neighbors. Still don't trust anyone with their house keys. Still check and double check every lock every night. Raj's voice, my daughter is in therapy. She has nightmares about David, but not about him being a killer. She has nightmares about him being nice to her, about hugging him, about trusting him. How do you explain to a teenager that kindness can be a weapon? Mrs. Patterson passed away 4 months after David's arrest. Natural causes. But her family says she never recovered from the guilt. Never stopped believing she could have prevented those murders if she'd just paid attention to the signs. But here's what I find most disturbing about this entire story. It's not the murders. It's not the bodies in the basement. It's not even David's chilling confession. It's how easily it could happen again. The mirror. Right now, as you're listening to this, There are an estimated 25 to 50 active serial killers in the United States. Most of them will never be caught. Most of them don't fit the Hollywood stereotype of the crazy loner living in isolation. They are teachers, coaches, business owners, healthcare workers. They are married with children. They volunteer at charities. They help their neighbors. They are pillars of their communities. They are David Richter. So I need you to do something for me. Right now, I need you to think about your own neighborhood, your own street. Who's the really helpful neighbor? Who's the person everyone trusts? Who's the one who always shows up when people need help? I'm not saying they're a killer. I'm saying pay attention. Because the residents of Willowbrook Avenue learned something that every person needs to understand. Evil doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a sign. It doesn't look like the monsters in movies. Evil looks like David Richter. Friendly, helpful, trustworthy David Richter who murdered 23 women while his neighbors waved to him every morning. Margaret Chen still waves to people, still makes casseroles for new neighbors, still believes in human kindness. But now she also pays attention. Really pays attention. Margaret's voice, I'm not going to let David Richter turn me into a paranoid hermit. But I'm also never going to be that naive again. Trust, but verify. Be kind, but be careful. Help others, but protect yourself. The story of Willowbrook Avenue isn't just a true crime case. It's a warning. It's a reminder that the most dangerous monsters are the ones we never suspect. They are hiding in plain sight. They might be hiding next door. Sweet dreams. The real questions. Before you click away from this video, before you go back to your normal life, I need you to sit with some uncomfortable questions. Question 1. If David Richter moved in next door to you tomorrow, would you recognize the signs? Or would you be just like Margaret, Tom, and the Patels, grateful for the help, charmed by the kindness, completely blind to the monster underneath? Question 2. How many times have you been alone with someone you barely know? Your Uber driver, the repair technician in your home, the helpful stranger who offered to carry your groceries, the new co-worker who stays late at the office. How many opportunities do we give potential predators every single day? Question 3. And this is the one that should keep you awake tonight. What if you're wrong about someone you trust right now? What if your helpful neighbor, your friendly co-worker, your charming dating app match? What if they are studying you the same way David studied his victims? I know what you're thinking. This is making me paranoid. I can't live my life suspecting everyone. And you're right. You can't. You shouldn't. But you also can't live your life assuming everyone is safe. The residents of Willowbrook Avenue weren't stupid. They weren't naive. They were normal people making normal assumptions about normal behavior. And those normal assumptions nearly got some of them killed. So what's the solution? How do you stay safe without becoming a paranoid recluse? How do you trust people without becoming a victim? After interviewing dozens of survivors, law enforcement officials, and criminal psychologists for this story, here's what I learned. First, trust your instincts, even when they seem irrational. Margaret Chen heard those sounds from David's garage and talked herself out of investigating. Mrs. Patterson smelled something wrong and convinced herself it was fertilizer. Your subconscious picks up on things your conscious mind dismisses. Second, pay attention to patterns, not just individual incidents. David helping one neighbor isn't suspicious. David knowing everyone's schedule, having access to multiple houses, being the go-to person for every problem, that's a pattern worth noticing. Third, remember that real kindness doesn't keep score. David's helpfulness always came with invisible strings attached. He was collecting information, building dependency, creating opportunities. Genuine kindness doesn't have an agenda. Fourth, verify stories independently. David told different neighbors different things about his background, his wife, his family. No one ever compared notes. No one ever fact-checked his claims. In the age of social media and Google, there's no excuse for not knowing basic information about people you trust. And finally, create networks, not dependencies. Don't rely on one person for help, information, or safety. David became indispensable to his neighbors by being their only source of assistance. Spread your trust across multiple people. Build community connections that don't rely on any single individual. But here's the most important thing I learned from this story. Evil relies on our politeness, our social conditioning. our reluctance to ask uncomfortable questions or make accusations without proof. David Richter killed 23 women because good people were too polite to be suspicious. So here's what I want you to do after you finish listening to this. I want you to take an honest inventory of your own life. Who has access to your home? Who knows your daily routine? Who have you shared personal information with? Who would you call if you needed help in an emergency? Now ask yourself, what do you actually know about these people? Not what they've told you. What you've independently verified. What you've observed over time. What your instincts tell you when you're not trying to be polite. I'm not asking you to become paranoid. I'm asking you to become aware. Because awareness is the only defense against predators who hide behind helpfulness. The victims of David Richter can't warn you, but their story can. The neighbors of Willowbrook Avenue can't undo their trust, but their experience can teach you. Somewhere out there, right now, another David Richter is moving into another quiet neighborhood. Another friendly neighbor is offering to help with groceries, fix broken appliances, house sit for vacations. Another community is about to learn that monsters don't always look like monsters. The question is, will it be your community? Will it be your neighbor? Will it be you? Pay attention.